Welcome to episode 38 of Cyclops is Waiting for Me, an X-Men The Animated Series weekly recap podcast. I'm JC, and Rod is fucking up our recording device.
Well, this is a little spoiler. We have a guest today, so we're using some equipment we only use for guests. I'm keeping an eagle eye on this screen or whatever. Anyway, I'm Rod. Outside this podcast, I do music stuff. You can just look up Rod Kim on the internet. Today we have our guest, Shawn DePasquale. Shawn, tell us about yourself.
I also co-host a podcast where we rewatch a TV show from the 90s.
Nice.
It is The Nanny, starring Fran Drescher. I was trying to find some link or connection between this and that, and there really isn't one. But, I also love the X-Men, and when I'm not watching The Nanny, I've worked in comics for over 2 decades as a writer and an editor and a letterer, and grew up reading comics, so I'm very excited to talk about the X-Men.
You do have some experience with comics.
Yeah, I have serious comic cred. I just do the Nanny thing on the side, and that's what I'm promoting right now. But if you want to read my comics, you can find my name, and if you Google that in comics, a bunch of stuff comes up, and I'd love for anyone to read it.
Cool.
Any of them star Fran Drescher?
Not yet.
Well, now we know what we're going for.
Yeah.
No, but I definitely did a team book where it was about this, these 4 girls in space doing cool stuff. But I did it because I always wanted to write a team book because I loved the X-Men growing up, and I never tried doing let me put a group together and work on the group dynamic stuff and all of that. So yeah, and probably every cool male lead I ever wrote was partially inspired by Wolverine.
Not by Cyclops?
No.
For shame.
The grumbly, I guess I gotta do what I gotta do. But then he's got a heart of gold. No,
does he though?
I got a whole problem with you guys as Cyclops love, because
what love? Literally, the whole series is mocking Cyclops.
I mean, yeah, but what I'm saying is you can't be pushing Cyclops into any kind of realm of heroic lead. He sucks.
No, that's kind of the joke of the podcast name, is because
he sucks.
What Gene?
What is the line?
Cyclops is waiting for me.
It's Wolverine. He had just been injured by Sabretooth in one of the first season episodes, and he's recovering, and they have this awkward moment where they're about to kiss, and Jean is like, I should go, Cyclops is waiting for me, and then Wolverine dejectedly is like, so am I. And we didn't even realize when we picked the name that scene gets so many flashbacks throughout the series. So as we're watching the episodes, we literally that's the name of our show.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah,
that worked out.
Yeah,
I was wondering where the name came from.
Yeah, it's a moment that it's just Cyclops sucks, even though they don't directly say he sucks.
That specific episode has all of the X-Men memes.
Yeah,
it's the one with
with the in the bed,
picture, and everything.
Also, the one where Cyclops and Jean are making out in the background, and the Wolverine is just dejected in the foreground. That's also
that same episode.
Yeah.
It's literally
crazy.
the meme episode.
It's so funny.
I think the only memes outside that episode are from the Christmas episode.
Sure.
Right. That's it.
And the Juggernaut bitch.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, Cyclops is Waiting for Me is our weekly podcast series where we're going back and watching every single episode of the original 1992 X-Men the Animated Series in the original intended script order, building up to the release of X-Men 97 coming to Disney Plus in 2023. For those of you who are wondering how we determine the order of the episodes, we utilize the listed order previously on X-Men, the making of an animated series by the lead showrunner Eric Lewald, which is also available for reference on Wikipedia, and now Disney Plus. They corrected their order. Speaking of, Disney Plus has adjusted their episodes to be in that order. As of this recording, because of how streaming goes, we don't know if they'll just randomly decide to screw it up again because fun.
Yeah, well, it's in the proper order on Disney Plus. I do not know when they're going to fix it on Amazon and such. But quick reminders: we're a recap show about a series that came out 26 years ago. There are going to be spoilers, and if you don't want it spoiled for you, pause the podcast, watch the episode, come back, and we're going to do our best to avoid mentioning anything about future episodes we haven't covered yet. Comics and such, totally fair game though. And if not surprised by the amount of shade we throw at Disney constantly, we are not affiliated with or sponsored by them in any way, shape, or form.
Don't forget to follow us on social media at Cyclops IWFM Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook. Make sure, of course, to follow us on your favorite podcast services. Finally, we record these episodes in batches right now, hence I'm on my second cup of coffee. And if we're reacting to any news about the upcoming series, we will be a few weeks behind.
Yeah, we're not reacting to news today. On to the show. So today we're going to be talking about season 4, episode 2, titled A Deal with the Devil. It aired on September 14th, 1996. Currently sits at a 7.3 star rating on IMDb. And Shawn, when you and I were figuring out what episode you were going to guest on, you specifically said, I want an Omega Red episode. So.
Yeah. So I wanted an Omega Red episode because I was a big action figure guy as a kid, and I loved the Omega Red figure and didn't realize at first what it like. I had never seen him in comics somehow. I missed that arc, even though I was like avidly reading comics at that time. But
Well, he was
then-
only in like
just a couple.
6 X-Men
And I-
books from the Jim Lee run.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I missed him, and like, but then I got the figure before I saw him on the show, and then started to get the character on the show, and was just like, these are my favorite episodes. Like, I love this guy.
He was a great figure. I do remember
It's
that.
an awesome. It came with like he had the tentacles kind of like came
Yeah.
out of his palms, and you could like whip him around.
Yeah, he had the little switches on on his.
You could suck him back in. You
Yep.
pull him in or push him out. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was cool. It was
And
really cool.
Rod is also familiar with a lot of characters because of the action figures before the show too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
yeah. Shatterstar, I think, is another.
That was a cool figure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's him, right? The Mojo guy, Shatterstar. Or is that-
Longshot?
that's
Long shot. Sorry,
Yes.
long shot.
Shot.
That's a figure that like, and Trevor Fitzroy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another one that I had
Like-
that figure and had no idea who that was until I saw him pop up on the
They have
X-Men
not used that
cartoon.
character in the comics in years.
Years.
Yeah.
Trevor
We
Fitzroy.
were just talking about Raza too.
Raza,
He's just
yep.
kind of like an amalgamation. I would not have
Of
recognized
random
him.
sci-fi parts.
Yep.
Yeah, I just would not have recognized him without the figure.
Also, before we get into the specific episode from the Starjammers, did you know that the name of the big lizard character is Chode and not Chod?
Chode?
Yes.
Are you sure?
That's what they say in the show.
Chode.
It like I always read it as Chod because I'm like, there's no way his name is actually Chode. That is the canon way they
Listen,
pronounce it.
Those guys were having a good time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, they were having fun. They were making comics and having fun. They're like,
Right.
call him Chode. It'll be hilarious.
By having fun, we mean getting high.
I see that. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
kicking into the episode, this, because of the order that it aired, actually has the new remix version of the song.
Yeah, the weird.
And the intro that is more of like your highlights of episodes rather than just doing the character card moments of it.
I will give them this. It is like more like intense.
It is.
So they probably were going for the extreme 90s.
I was I made a disappointed when it popped up last
it's
night.
weird. Oh, so you don't know this. I talked to Ron Wasserman, who did the original X-Men theme song.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is with this new version? And he hadn't heard it. So we were at a bar and he was listening to it on my phone. And he was like, I don't know where this came from.
Wow.
So they re-recorded
So it was
some
some Fox executive was like, we got to make it more extreme, baby. And it's like, why? It's perfect. They never did that with the 90s Spider-Man theme. I think they kept that one the whole way.
I
through.
think they did.
That was the Edge, right?
Yes.
Yeah, from U2.
Was it?
No,
Yeah.
Flea.
No,
No.
it was the Edge.
The Edge.
Yeah, from U2. He wrote that, the Spider-Man.
Yeah.
That was the Edge. Yeah.
Yeah. I knew it was one of those. One of those guys. Somebody.
I don't think Flea writes anything at this point. So.
Yeah, the Edge.
No.
That's right.
So, episode kicks off. We are at the Caucasus Mountains.
That's why they did the Spider-Man musical.
Holy
that
shit.
guy
Oh,
loves.
I didn't even think about that.
Right?
No, I did
that
not.
guy was. They were like, "Hey, do you want to do a Spider-Man musical?" And he was like, "Ooh, please,
Little did he know.
Oh.
please! I wrote the theme song and I loved it so much." Maybe that guy just loves Spider-Man. Yeah, and then it was a
Probably.
disaster.
And you know that the producers of Turn Off the Dark. Is that
Yeah.
Yep, turn off the dark.
Are watching Pink's current tour and be like, fuck.
Yeah.
She's doing all the stuff that they tried to do.
We were
They
so
failed.
close.
Like all the harness work.
Yep.
She's
Right.
flying over the audience while singing
Yep.
stuff. And so like, okay, so it can be done.
Yeah,
But she's not dressed as the Black Cat as she does it.
and she hasn't. No one's gotten injured yet.
I mean, her outfit is close to Black Cat. It's like she's in the spandex while flying. Yes, nobody's gotten injured so far.
Exactly.
That's why the producers are like, shit.
This will age well if somebody gets injured like next
no.
week.
Oh, knock on wood. Everyone, be careful.
Yeah. So, Caucasus Mountains, I don't know what those are, but it's
Yeah.
apparently in the former Soviet Union. And we see a bunch of tents on a cliffside, and a bunch of soldiers are digging in the snow, and then we see a tentacle. The only thing that stood out to me from that is that's a very weird spot to bury somebody, is in a cliffside, because that didn't look like a big, safe cliff to bury somebody in.
No,
And
it did
also,
not.
I don't give a lot of credit to Dark Star from the Winter Guard of choosing that to be the spot to bury
Yeah.
Omega Red after Storm froze him in the last episode.
Yeah, it's like I would like launch them into like another planet or something.
Or a freezer.
Yeah.
Or an abyss. Like weight him down and throw him to the bottom of the ocean in like a cryo
Which
chamber
feels like
or,
something that
you
Russia
know?
would have done, right?
Yeah. Also, it's really cold down there, so we don't know. Maybe that's cold enough I don't know, to slow him down.
You know, they make a lot of weird decisions about the people that are, apocalyptic in this series. Though.
Right.
We could end the world, but we'll just put you in this corner and wait
Yeah.
it out.
No. So the soldier calls for the colonel. We realize these are not Russian soldiers. These are definitely Americans. And you reveal that it is Omega Red, and they say, well, the living weapon has a job to do. And we jump back over to an American facility, and they're kind of just giving Omega Red a little bit of a recap of what's been going on. And he's still very much in like, there is a war between our countries right now. And he doesn't want to accept that the war's over, essentially.
Yeah. So the colonel says something like, the war's over. We won.
I mean,
lost,
turns out Omega Red's right. Because it never really ended, and they're back.
It was just quieter.
Yeah, exactly. He's right. It's still going.
Yep. But they're essentially like, yeah, we got a deal for you, and we're going to make you human again. And he's like, well, why would you do that? And it's like, well, we need you to go into the waters off of Hawaii, just outside of Pearl Harbor. We have a nuclear submarine that has a reactor core that's unsafe. And it's like...
And it's on a ledge.
Yeah. the ledge of a reef. And it's like, that's a shitty spot for somebody to leave a sub.
Thematically, though, it's interesting because they really start, even from this very first scene, they start hitting like the big like thematic concept, which is like, does Omega Red see himself as just a weapon, or is there humanity in him? And that's like, I mean, not to jump ahead, but that's like sort of what Storm is saying later on, where, she's like, but what? Like, no, you're a person. You're not a weapon. Like, weapons don't have feelings, so you can't feel something. Otherwise, that means you are a person. And this scene right away establishes that, pretty subtly too. Like, it's just, it works within context. So it's good writing.
Yeah, and I did appreciate, because we don't really know what Omega Red feels about himself. Like, does he feel like he is the living weapon?
Right.
Because that's
or does he want to be human again?
Right.
Or does he feel abused by his government, or is he so far gone that he's literally just like a weapon, an emotionless robot?
It's a lot of what we've also seen from Wolverine over the years in the comics, because he tries to be human, but a lot of times doesn't. He has to revert to being the weapon to save the day.
Yes, and that's why they're so good. It is a little like, yeah, that's also what Sabretooth does, where you're like, yeah, sure, it's a great relationship that was already clearly established between him and Sabretooth. We're just kind of treading the same ground again. But yes,
but Russia.
But Russia. Yeah.
And cooler powers.
Yeah, and cooler powers. Mm-hmm.
To their credit, the military is like, well, we don't trust you. So at least they're honest about that aspect. But I also don't think that Omega Red trusts them, that they could actually reverse whatever has been done to him either.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So their solution, the military, is we're going to put a vial of liquid nitrogen into you. And at first I was like, that's a dumb thing.
They suicide squad him.
No,
but the liquid nitrogen makes the most sense, because of anybody, we've seen cold, and deep cold is what affects Omega Red the most. So it's like, okay, nanites weren't a common trope that we would always talk about like we do today back in the 90s. So it's like, okay, liquid nitrogen seems viable.
Yeah.
Sure. And it's like, Terminator probably is somewhere coming out around this time, isn't it? Terminator 2.
That was what, 94?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was that was
the Terminator 2 was liquid nitrogen, so everyone was like, "Oh yeah, they use liquid nitrogen and freeze him."
Yes, because in the Bishop episodes, Wolverine calls him the Terminator, I think. So Omega Red wants some assurances too. So he needs two shipmates, and he chooses Wolverine and Storm.
Yeah.
Completely arbitrarily.
Yeah. Doesn't even tell them why. It's like, no, this is a hostage situation right now, guys. Not because they're providing any value to the mission.
I mean, Wolverine, you sort of can, and I guess Storm, because she froze him, right? That's why. So he's like vengeful.
But it's not random. It's not assurance to complete the mission. It is literally just, these are hostages.
Collateral, and we find out there's like a little bit more subtext for Storm, other than just that she froze him. But we'll get into that as the episode goes along. Yep. It was all very calculated. He thought this through.
So we jump to the mansion, and Wolverine finds out what's going on, and he's just straight up pissed. Like, there's no other way.
But I love this because he's really not, and it's like, my note on this was, I love that Wolverine's bitching to bitch, but he's secretly so thrilled to go do something. Like, he loves this, because as soon as they get to the end of the scene, he's like, yeah, let's go, I'm ready. Yeah. So he doesn't really care. He just wants to complain. Yeah. He's an old curmudgeon.
I did appreciate the dig he gave, though. He's like, what is it? This isn't Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah, I mean, he's right about, but it's also like, Wolverine knows exactly what they're doing. It's what they normally. Yeah. They didn't want to come ask Wolverine to do this, clearly, so they dug up another Wolverine to do it for them. Right.
Yeah. And the excuse would be from the government is like, well, he knows the long lost codes that are associated to the ship, which I'm sorry, somebody else knows those codes.
Well, also he was actually invincible to the radiation too. I think.
Of course,
Right.
Point.
Well, the point being is like Wolverine is well aware this is what the U.S. government does. They make and find weapons to use to do stuff that they want to do. You know, and so this is what that is.
Where you were saying like Xavier was like, well, maybe I should go, and Wolverine's like, well, no.
Yeah, immediately. No. Please. I've already sharpened my claws.
He's that one coworker that complains just to complain.
Yeah, no, I just like Wolverine as the coworker that's like, complains about everything, and then when someone's like, well, I can do it, he's like, you won't do it right anyway. I'll do it, you know?
Yeah. I'll just do it myself. I'll get it right the first time.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, Storm's like, I didn't agree to anything.
No.
I don't know why I'm here.
Why is this guy just yelling over me right now? But Wolverine also does point out he does not believe that the nitrogen is going to work. And he basically says, like, Omega Red eats this stuff for breakfast.
Yeah.
So you get that Chekhov's gun. And it's like, cool. We know that this is going to fuck up. It's just how is it going to fuck up, essentially?
Yeah.
So jump over to the base. Everybody's getting ready by the subs. Omega Red is just riling Wolverine up, and he's loving every second of it because he knows Wolverine isn't going to go at him in front of the military.
Yeah.
This is like kind of a classic bottle episode too, where it's like, it's really just like couple of X-Men are like the main characters and Omega Red. And I love when shows get into their later seasons and they're just like, I don't know, put like Omega Red and Storm and Wolverine in a submarine. That'll be fun. And it's fun to see like, oh, how would these characters deal with, and because like, why is Storm there? It's so weird. It's not even like a great atmosphere for her powers really to work in, because like she's very limited by like just the atmosphere, I guess, around them. Like I don't really 100%. I like did go to the Wikipedia page for Storm and try to understand, like, could her powers even work in a submarine?
This way, we've talked about that too, about them in space and stuff. Like, is she tied to like Earth? Or, like,
she's not fully tied to Earth because she helped terraform Mars and the Krakoa stuff.
Yeah, but also we had that episode Dark Phoenix where they were like in like on the moon and she was still able to use her power. Like, so yeah, it's like, this is like goes.
It's tied to atmosphere.
Marvel.com's like official Storm entry gets into, she's labeled as Omega, and it gets into like she's got it's a molecular level thing that she's able to like manipulate molecules and turn, so she can like make wind, she can make lightning, right? So that was hence when she shocks him later, so you're like, okay, she made static electricity. Fair.
So I was gonna save it to later in the episode, but I think you referencing that it is a bottleneck is really interesting.
Bottle episode.
This is actually what Eric Lewald calls the 2-day wonder. This was originally not what the script was. There was a script that was called Bring Me Charles Xavier, or the alternate title was Bring Me the Head of Charles Xavier, and the entire episode was killed by Joe Calamari over at Marvel. He'd written like over 10,000 words on it, and they had to come up with something because they had to send it off for animation. So he did this in like a coffee-fueled weekend and wrote this entire script in 2 days.
Oh, nice.
So it is like one of those things where it ended up being one of the things that Eric Lewald doesn't like about the series sometimes, when it's more about the plot than about the people in the plot.
Yeah.
So to your point, it's like it is a very different vibe than a lot of the other episodes.
Yeah, well, and it's a lot of dialogue.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like people talking, and that fills up time and takes up space, and then it's cheaper to produce it because then you only have 3 actors to pay instead of your normal whatever the team is, like 12 actors plus your villains. This is like, get the 4 of them, and like Professor he'll do a line.
this batch that we're recording today is kind of like that. Like we had just done one which is basically like Storm, Cyclops, and
Corsair.
Yeah.
Yep. So all that said, we see Wolverine getting riled up by Omega Red. He can't do anything about it. Storm is holding him back, and then we get the drop in about her claustrophobia being, know, something to reference.
Looks into the sub, and there's like that weird distortion.
Yeah, they actually give a distortion vibe for it.
and like the whole time, because they get in the sub, right?
They get in the sub,
and then the whole time they're in there, Omega Red is just like taunting Wolverine and like antagonizing him.
He's doing a great job of it too.
And like I had this vivid moment where I was like, man, as a kid, this felt like Game of Thrones to me. This show felt like the stakes couldn't be higher. And I watched it as an adult, and I'm like, it's WWE, it's wrestling. It's not anywhere close to the drama or intrigue or like well written dialogue I thought it was as a kid. But it's still enjoyable. It's just more like wrestling. It's just like, oh, I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you worse.
And I think this is one of the like early moments we figure out, like, part of Storm being there is that she's also like kind of the collateral for Wolverine.
Yeah.
So the Omega Red's like, even if you get pissed enough at me, are you going to be angry enough to sacrifice her?
Yeah.
For this whole situation.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because if he goes one-on-one with Wolverine, he thinks Wolverine will go off the deep end and be down to kill them both.
Yeah.
But he knows if you go too far, you're taking your friend out, and you won't do that.
Because they're in a submarine, a very small submarine, a mini sub. They even reference it.
It sucks they make her the damsel in distress in this. You know, like it's like, oh dear, help me, Wolverine!
I didn't
and it's
think
like,
about that, yeah.
it does suck a little bit. It's like it almost would have been cooler if Wolverine's the one that needs the rescuing in that point of the episode where he like wraps her, you know, where like Omega Red like wraps her up and he's like literally just carrying her around like a suitcase,
Yeah.
Right.
And you're like, oh boy, like it would have been almost cooler if Wolverine ends up in that situation and she has to almost sacrifice herself to, you know, in some way to save him. That would have been pretty dope.
A little foreshadowing.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
So they actually get on the mini sub the reveal of why the military is trusting Omega Red, and Omega is like straight up, well, they don't trust me, one, but two, also I'm going to do it because I want my humanity back. And I think to your point earlier, it's like, does he actually want his humanity back?
Right. Also, I think Mickey Rourke should play. I know he was not great in Iron Man 2, but I want Mickey Rourke from Iron Man 2, played Whiplash, to play Omega Red in the MCU.
I wonder how like drained his face will be at that point.
Like better character.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like imagine like a really old Omega Red who's dug up now, and it's just like, oh, I'm just like basically what he played as Whiplash as.
Yeah, basically Mickey Rourke.
Yeah, Mickey Rourke. Yeah.
To be fair,
I said what I said.
Yeah, he would be a good carry-on from Spider-Man too.
Sure. Yeah.
It's the multiverse thing. They're like, oh, in this universe, you're actually Omega Red.
Whatever. Or in the MCU, he discovers he has a mutation. I'm flexible.
That's what I mean, though. Like, we have a multiverse now. Anything's possible.
Oh,
like, recast you.
Wolverine does something that I thought was really weird, where he actually argues against the humanity coming back.
Yeah.
It's like, I feel like if that is actually the reason why Omega Red is accepting the deal, maybe don't tell him that it can't work, because then you take away any leverage that you guys actually had at that point.
Yeah.
He also makes a Chernobyl reference where he's like, make sure to take the sub down easy, because if they build subs like they do reactors, we're in trouble. And it's like, as a kid, I'm like, I had no idea what Chernobyl was.
No. Yeah. Oh no. Or that like maybe that's not like the best joke to be making. Like,
That was pretty
to be fair, like at the time they were making some digs on Russia.
Of course.
They were literally calling like Ruskies in like previous episodes. They didn't care about offending Russians.
We were like researching, is this still a slur?
Yeah, is this a slur? Is now appeared in Rod's search history.
That's funny.
So they have a rough landing on the ship. We hear the Canadian sorry instead of a full-fledged sorry, and talk shit about the quality of the control of the ship too.
Yeah.
That was and they drop on their helmets and they go into the ship.
Oh yeah, and if we haven't talked about it yet or mentioned it yet, up until this point, Omega Red's been in like Hannibal Lecter like Bond.
Oh yeah,
like everything's covered, he's tethered down, so they like let him go at this moment. So
yeah, it like explodes off him. Like it's like
looks
everything
like Doomsday when Superman first meets him and he's all like wrapped up.
Rod does not get that reference.
You hate Superman?
No, Rod doesn't read any old comics.
So the you just are an X-Men animated series fan.
I'm a casual fan. Like even for this show, I have a memory of a goldfish.
Oh, okay.
So with comic books, even the ones I do read,
less so.
I don't remember like 30 minutes later.
Fair.
Yep.
Well, I'll just take my word for it.
Yeah, no, I know Doomsday though, so I could visualize the whole get-up.
Yeah.
So Omega Red hops over to the controls, boots up the ship, and then Wolverine makes a Duracell reference.
Yes.
Or sorry, Energizer.
Yeah, like that damn bunny.
Yep. Oh, it would have been great if he called it that damn bunny.
Or whatever, yeah.
Now I want that to be like in my headcanon what he actually said. They engage the props on it, and then the sub kind of like starts to drift down into the reef.
No, it's even better. He says they should use this in one of those ads with the battery rabbit.
Yep.
Which is
battery rabbit.
The battery rabbit.
That for the most part, that is the only like fun fact that appeared on any of the websites we use for reference of like the trivia of the episodes. Exactly. Is it's literally the Energizer rabbit is the only reference in the episode.
No, interestingly enough, I bet you that was a S&P thing or like a legal thing because they probably couldn't clear him saying Energizer bunny, so it became battery rabbit. Yep. They didn't even want him. They were like, he can't even say the word bunny, and they're like, okay, rabbit.
Funny like mini trivia. I forget what company it is, but outside the U.S., one of Energizer's competitors actually has the bunny as their mascot.
Interesting.
And it's a long, ongoing
feud.
trademark feud or whatever. So
That's awesome.
That's another podcast. But if you want to Google it for some entertainment, the whole thing about Energizer Bunny is like a uniquely like international American.
That's so
like,
cool.
rivalry.
That's another. You said that's another podcast, and in my head, I was like, "Does this guy host a battery podcast?"
No.
I am fascinated. I want to know what. No wonder he doesn't know about comics. He's hosting the history of battery.
He's
podcast.
really fucking into batteries.
He's so cool.
Rod,
about
so
this.
that's going to be your responsibility to find that, to throw it on the Instagram when this
Okay.
episode goes live.
Cool.
Yeah. Cool. So it starts to dip into the reef, and they end up recovering, and that's where we get to see that Omega Red is going to show his cards, and he kind of balls up really quickly as soon as he knows that the sub is working. He doesn't call him Colonel; he calls him Coronel.
Yeah.
Yep. Because I mean that one makes sense because it's the Russian version of it and stuff. But
Sure.
it's like, but I just distinctly remember, you know how there's a thing you will pronounce words wrong if you read it first as opposed to heard it, and that was me as a kid. I didn't know Colonel and Conel were
Conel.
different. Yeah, I was like, I said it once, and somebody looked at me like really weird in like third grade, and then I quickly learned the right pronunciation for it.
Yeah.
That's me in basically every California city.
Yeah. The Colonel.
Kohanga.
The Colonel is essentially like, look, dude, we're gonna blow your brains out. You already got the ship working.
Yeah.
And Omega Red just drops the tentacle into the back of his neck and just pulls it right out.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you guys didn't plan this out very well, did you?
Yeah, he's like, this was from like a air rifle or something.
Yeah, that was a little disappointing.
That it was just so simple.
That he just pulled it out, like, because they had even. The writers had even given themselves when earlier Wolverine's like, it's not even going to do anything. He eats that shit for breakfast or whatever he says. So it's like all they had to do was have them be like, all right, we're calling your bluff, Omega Red.
And
beep,
press
and
it
press
then.
it. And it pops and everyone's like, oh. And then he's like, you idiots.
Yeah.
Like they had it. And so to like undercut any tension with just like, boop.
Yeah.
And he throws it on the floor. You're like, and then Wolverine even goes like, I told you.
Yeah.
Well, funny enough, they went back to that in a recent, I want to say it's X-Force, where he literally has an implant that they're going to detonate. And then when he finds out from it, I think it's from Mikhail,
Okay.
that he's like, oh yeah, I just pull it out and I don't tell them that I pulled it out kind of scenario.
Also,
So people love putting implants in this man.
I guess like I like Mandela effect myself into forgetting what Professor X sounded like on this, but how did we all go from like this version of Professor X and his voiceover character to like it has to be Patrick Stewart?
I think Patrick Stewart just like fit the look so much that we just started in like.
And we all just wanted him to have that.
Yeah.
Because then in my head, I was like, oh, this guy's going to have a British accent. And when he first opens his mouth, when I watched this episode and he's, and I
It's
started to
super
rewatch.
dry white guy
And he's
now.
like, all right, you guys, we've got to go get him.
Yeah.
I'm like, what is this? How did we all just go like, no, he should be British. He was always meant to be British.
Yeah.
It's what Stanley intended.
Yep. Stan always wanted him to be British. And then even when we go to first class, it's younger British.
Yeah. Yeah. Even though he's in like upstate New York.
Yeah, it's fine. So obviously Wolverine, like you said, is like, fucking told you guys, and he's ready to go, but Storm holds him back. And this is where we get into what we were chatting about earlier. It's like, oh, yeah, you might be able to survive this, but if he tears our suits, I'm going to die.
Yeah. I control air molecules, but not radiation molecules.
Yeah.
Right.
And then Wolverine says, fuck it, and goes for it anyway.
Almost instantly.
Yeah. It's like, sorry, Storm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he did say on an earlier episode, and I quote, I go where I want to go.
Wolverine does the attack and he quickly gets tossed back by Omega Red. And then Storm is able to, like we said, use the molecule. Well, only one thing I just want to point out. This was a sunken sub. There were no bodies on this. There should have been a dead body on that sub somewhere.
Yeah.
Didn't Omega Red clean it up beforehand? So maybe the U.S. government cleaned it up beforehand. Like maybe they went in there, got it all like ready to
Swept it
go.
up, like,
Yeah.
Because like if it was sunk, how could it even be floating right now or
Yeah.
doing anything that it's doing? So someone obviously had to repair it
Yeah.
and make
Somebody
it
just like,
workable.
bailed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. I do appreciate how strong, so Wolverine is hurting from the radiation because he popped his own suit essentially
Yes, yeah,
with his
'cause-
claws. And Storm like drags him to a ladder. The dude is a brick shit house. Like
Yeah.
we've talked about
He
this.
would be fine.
Well, his healing factor is nowhere near as good in this show as it is in the comics. Like you go back to the early Sabretooth episode,
Yeah.
and he gets slashed across the stomach by Sabretooth, and he's recovering like 2 days later. Like the actual scene
Well,
where he's,
then he's killable in this.
yeah.
Well, I guess also like he's actively being poisoned while it's happening. So maybe it's
Sure,
not
but
quite-
wouldn't it be just constantly
Yeah.
fighting? I mean, he'd be weaker, but like
Yeah.
I don't know that he'd be in any real danger
Yeah.
of dying.
But I'm just impressed that Storm is able to drag him to the ladder so easily. Like,
well, I wrote that note and I was like, I don't understand. Is this Wolverine not weigh anything?
Yes,
because it seems like that would be really, really, really hard.
He weighs whatever a muscular man weighs plus a metal skeleton.
Yeah, he's like 5'2" and just brick shit.
I don't know. Maybe they've established that adamantium is like super, super hard and durable, but doesn't weigh as much. I don't know.
I think we've seen numbers where he's estimated to be like 285 to 300. So props to Storm because she like puts him on her shoulder.
She's a beast.
Yeah,
she's a beast. That's why it's even more unbelievable that Omega Red was mishandling her, manhandling her all over the boat.
But as they get to the ladder, Omega Red stops him and he reveals a full plan that he is going to target 15 largest cities in the world with the missiles, and he just wants to watch the world burn.
You said he's going to target, and I wanted you to stop there. He reveals he's going to Target, and they're like, no, not Target. The savings.
You're going to leave with the TV.
I want to go to Target when I want to watch the world burn. So
he's like, I hate capitalism. I want to destroy it all, starting with Target.
I feel like growing up in the Northeast, Target wasn't like on our radar at that point. Like we barely had Walmarts.
How old are you?
Almost 40.
Okay, yeah, no, Kmart is what we had growing up. They didn't have Walmart or Target.
Bradley's and Caldor.
Kmart. It was Kmart, but Kmart is the same thing. Kmart became Walmart, became Target.
I was gonna say, if you want to watch the world burn, you kind of live within like driving distance of the Burbank Walmart, so that's as close to the apocalypse.
I live within driving distance of the other Walmart in the valley, and that's even worse.
Yeah. You have multiple ones in there.
Yeah.
Oh no, I've been to that one. That one's not even a Walmart building.
No, it's not.
It's like a converted something
else.
It's
a weird warehouse.
Former prison.
Maybe, actually.
Still current prison. So we start to hear Beast and Rogue and Professor X, and he basically says, like, it's a last resort, but we're going to have to engage.
Everything I learned about nuclear warheads, I learned from Beast in this episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the extent of all my knowledge and all it'll ever be.
Yep. And then we go to the Air Force, the non-specific military base, where they're asking for support from the Air Force, and they're like, well, your agency didn't tell us shit, which is the most U.S. government thing ever, of like, oh wait, two groups are not communicating well, and it's going to possibly result in the death of millions.
It's the U.S. government. Yeah. Like, they make it pretty clear it's the U.S. They just are very, very vague about like what alphabet soup is involved, you know?
Right. Well, we know that
FBI
we know it's either the Navy or the Air Force that is the support group that was not informed, but we don't know Department X or whatever.
Shadowy organization. SEAL Team 6.
Omega Red then kind of goes on like his like villain speech, and he talks about, well, the greatest sadness for a weapon is that they were created and then not used, and that's why he wants to blow up all these cities.
Yeah. Which says so much. And then we get to the core of the theme of that whole question, right? Yep. Is we learn then the answer to how does Omega Red see himself, and it is his humanity is completely gone by his estimation, and now not only have they wasted his humanity, they've wasted his use as a weapon. So he feels he's having a midlife crisis here, because he's like, if these precious weapons aren't used, then they're wasted, and that's him being like, I've just been frozen in ice and I'm the perfect weapon and no one's using me. Like, that's why he can even justify working for the U.S. government here, even though he's like, I hate you guys, and they're like, look, the war's kind of over, but anyway, don't use your weapon. And he's like, I am, please use me.
So just please pull my trigger.
It's really sad. It's really kind of like tragic and beautiful for a 90s kids cartoon, you know?
And then Storm has her quote of the show, which, Rod, I'm expecting you to have on hand.
Oh, no, I don't.
So it's right after that Omega Red says it's the greatest sadness.
Yeah, I know that the
so disappointed in you.
I know the essence of it was she's like, weapons don't have feelings.
There you go. You got it.
That actual quote?
Yeah.
Because it's like, weapons don't have feelings, so she's just
that Storm says that, right?
Yeah. Like, you're a person in there. Yeah. You had a daughter.
And are you that tired of life?
Yes.
Yep.
Given what day you ask, maybe,
yeah. No, it's tragic. It is really sad, and then I was like, oh, so this is kind of like they were. It's not just a dumb cartoon. Mm-hmm. They definitely were like lacing themes and stuff, like cool, deep themes of like existentialism, within this like Omega Red character, and that's pretty cool. Again, for like, you go back and watch. I mean, I went back and tried to watch Super Friends.
Oh, that
And
doesn't age anywhere near.
Ooh, nothing. We've got to go save the day. Yay, we've saved it.
It's like Spider-Man is amazing friend.
Yeah, there's just nothing going on
Don't
there.
you dare talk shit about Firestar.
They look, if you look
It's like
into...
they're just like, let's go, guys.
No, if you
Like,
watch those cartoons close enough and look into their eyes, you can see that they're just like, please kill me. Let us out of here. We're empty inside.
that's what I said about Mystique and the Dark Phoenix.
Oh, yeah, fair.
Hang on.
Then we get my favorite part. We're coming up to the part where Beast sends her down, or she jumps out, right, Rogue?
Not quite yet.
Okay, that's my favorite.
But to your point about him going through the midlife crisis,
yeah.
Omega Red also is like, yeah, I was under ice for a quarter of a century. Like, if anybody's going to appreciate life the most, it's me. And it's like, oh yeah, you had it taken away and now you're getting it back. It means more than the person who's never had shit taken away from them.
Did you
Yes.
get the implication that he
Yes.
was like, I wasn't even asleep? Like,
Yeah.
I was,
Yeah.
He was aware.
I was just like conscious for
He's-
decades.
Yeah, he's aware of how much. I mean, yeah. And he is, again, answering her question by being like, I am not human, I am a weapon, but also I'm mad that no one's using me.
Yeah.
Right. And then he reveals, yeah, I'm going to appreciate the most. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to launch this shit and then I'm going to dive down.
Yeah.
And then the world is going to just devolve into chaos. And I'm going to emerge later and pick up the pieces.
Yep.
So still wants to take over the world.
So at that point, all of a sudden, there is a surprise as a depth charge hits.
Yeah.
So the whole, like, let's not engage, they kind of turned that around really quickly.
I was kind of laughing at this too. They're setting depth charges down when they're like, don't rock the boat too much because there's a nuclear sub that might explode.
Yeah.
Like, nah, let's just blast it now.
It's only Hawaii.
Do you think their thinking, though, is like better to blow up the boat where it is than let him launch anything?
Yeah,
yeah.
He's a
100%.
maniac.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is
Well, and then there was that whole thing in like the end of the Cold War where we almost went into a nuclear war because somebody thought a missile was launched at another country.
Yes.
I can't imagine the government being like, hey, Russia, that nuclear warhead that just hit your country, we didn't launch it. It came from your own sub. And they would be like, yeah, fuck you. And then they would start hitting their
Of
buttons.
course, yeah.
But that charge essentially releases Storm and Wolverine, and then Storm gets a little bit more of her like, I'm going to shoot back. I'm going to fight down Omega Red again. We also learn something, like to your point, we learn more about nuclear missiles here than anywhere else in our life.
Anywhere.
That there is essentially a warhead override where if it's set, they come out hot
Yes.
as opposed to being activated as it gets closer to their target. I don't know if that's accurate. I kind of hope it is.
I'm going with it for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
If one ever gets launched, it will be like, don't worry, baby. There's a warhead thing in there.
And then all of a sudden the fallout starts.
Yeah, exactly.
And she's like, you lied to me.
Just here, let me hold you close.
But at that point, of course, the warheads do start launching. They pop out of the ship. Then there was a weird thing that I don't know. Again, we know fuck all about anything that's scientific or missiles at this point, but they all line up at the surface of the water and then shoot out all at the same
I don't
time.
think that's how that works.
I kind of don't think it is, but I also can't say for sure.
I don't think so.
It's like,
Because they kept saying he's got to get to launching
He had to get to a certain depth to be able to
depth
launch,
or whatever, right.
which was 200, which was an arbitrary.
Yeah.
200 inches.
Yeah.
And then the missiles shoot out of the top of the thing. And they, I'm pretty sure when you launch a missile, it's from underwater and it shoots
just
up
keeps
out of
going.
the water.
Yes.
It doesn't like line up and then eject.
Yeah, because they launched from the top of the sub, they got to the surface, and then they
And
waited.
then they waited.
I like the idea that they all just come up to the water and they all just like kind of convene. You're like, you good? You good?
You good?
Okay,
Everyone
now
good? All right, let's
And-
go. Team missile.
They all high five each other.
Yeah.
It's like free.
They're the bullets in Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah.
Like, yeehaw!
I was
I'm
gonna
gonna
go with
destroy a city.
I was gonna go with the worst version of the Planeteers, but that's even better. So first one pops up. That one gets shot out of the sky. Omega Red doesn't really know who did it, and neither does the army. And it's revealed that it was the Blackbird who was,
Like stealth mode.
which was a great spot for them to be. Like, that was actually
Yeah.
the right call.
Yeah.
They shoot the two others, and then 4 and 5 basically get away. Rogue is super confident in her targeting, and then she misses 4 and 5.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens.
But at least the Navy and or Air Force or whatever is able to take out the remaining ones. So props to the military for not being completely incompetent. We also see, which I think was one of the animation errors of the episode, is the missile screen that we saw earlier had 15 missiles on it. When the 5 launched, the 5 are indicated. And then all of a sudden, there are only 2 missiles left on the screen and they both go black. And I'm like, I rewound it. I'm like, wait, did he launch 15 missiles and I just can't count? And that was not the case?
Nope.
Yeah.
The screens
No.
on this episode were hilarious to me too, because even on the Blackbird with the depth charge screen, it's like they like cut out like they rotoscoped like Windows 98.
Yes.
And like when in text they're like,
Well, you said they were in a
charge.
rush making this one, so clearly they
It
were
was
like, "Come
definitely
on,
just-
hurry up, we got to do this."
Yeah, just a full-fledged rotoscope at that point. And then we get Beast giving this. I've never been bored in the middle of a Beast quote, but he gives the longest thing that I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
it was some out of context Shakespearean.
Yeah,
quote,
it felt like too much for him.
I liked it.
Did you?
I did. I liked it. I got as a sucker for it. I was like, "That's deep as shit."
I do
Wow.
appreciate. In the book that we reference all the time, there is an entire chapter that is just all the Beast quotes and references from
pretty
other
cool.
stuff. Yeah.
Let me see that book.
Yeah, of course.
That's pretty cool. I
Yeah.
didn't know this even existed.
There are two. I'll show you the other
There's
one.
two.
Yep.
Oh, this is so cool. And this is just him talking about working on the show and stuff?
Yep.
I
And the other one has art assets in it.
I
Yeah.
gotta get these books. This is
Previously on X-Men.
pretty dope.
So Omega Red realizes where he fucked up, and he decides, all right, cool, I'm going to do the override now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They actually paid that off. And at that point, we get the scene that you were
This is
referencing, Sean.
the best scene in the whole show.
Would you like to talk about that scene since you enjoyed it so much?
Rogue starts to like unbuckle, and Reese is like, "No, you can't possibly." She's like, it's time for me to go. I gotta go do this." And he's like, "Oh, you can't possibly do this. It's too far. You'll die." And then she like plops into the water, easily swims to the boat, and then I was like, "Wow, okay." And then she like bends part of it, and I'm like, "Okay, she's gonna swim to the surface." And then she bends like 17 more
Yeah.
parts
Yeah.
of the boat with no struggle,
None.
not any at all. And then when she eventually does like get back, she's like fine. They don't even do like a, "Oh my god, I
Yeah.
could barely breathe."
Yep.
She's completely fine.
Yep.
And I love that her quote. She's like, "I broke the boat."
I broke the boat. I broke the boat.
Well, she rips a hole in one of the panels, which I don't know what that does.
Yeah.
Because I'd imagine there's some level of it could take impacts or hits that if one little panel gets messed up, that doesn't.
Okay, so here's what I learned recently from watching reality television.
Wait, we have research?
Yeah, so
How are you on this show, sir?
Elizabeth and I watched this show called Below Deck on Bravo that's about sailing. It's about yachts. It's about really expensive yachts and like the crews and then the rich people that take the yachts out. Anyway, what I recently learned is we're talking like $1 million giant yachts, right? These huge boats. Well, underneath these boats, there are two, I can only describe them as little flappy flaps,
Yep.
two little metal flappy flaps, like the size of your hand, maybe a little bit bigger. If those don't work, the entire boat goes up and like side to side insanely. And it's just two little flaps.
Yeah.
So when she was like bending stuff on the outside of the boat, I immediately was like, "Oh yeah, she's destroying this submarine forever."
Right.
Because
And then-
those two little
yeah.
things are the only, and it made me never want to go on a boat again.
and then she goes to the rudder, which is the part that I actually
Yes,
know, because
yes.
that's the thing that's like
Steering.
yeah, and she just totally fucks that thing up. Yeah, but
Yeah, they're screwed.
the flappy flaps are interesting.
The flappy flaps. I mean, these are giant boats, and it happened where like the boat started to go crazy on this episode, and the captain, when it was all over, the captain's like, "Yeah, so apparently like there was like a power shortage, and these two things, and then they like cut under the boat and they show you the things." She's like, "They just stopped working for a minute," and it's like, that's it. That's all it takes.
Yeah,
It's a boat. It's supposed to float.
Yeah, physics is terrifying.
Terrifying.
Like you think about being in a plane while it's up in the air, like how
No
does physics
thanks.
work? Like,
I don't want to think. I don't want to think about it.
No.
It's magic.
Nope. Now I'm never going near a boat, let alone on a boat. But the attack from Rogue destroying the outer wall, whatever. Hull.
The hull.
Hull. That's
we
the
should
word.
also say, like, I couldn't remember why my whole life I loved Rogue so much. And like, it's this show. She's the coolest person on this whole
By
show
far.
by far. She says cool stuff. Even like Wolverine, like he's like, snarky anti-hero cool. But man, even just in this episode, she's so overpowered, but in a cool way.
No.
And she like does badass stuff, and then she makes like hilarious jokes afterwards. She's great, and you love her too because she's so super cute.
And I will just share this. Met the voice actress at San Diego Comic-Con.
Nice.
And props to her for being the ballsiest of any of the people that I met at the show. Anybody was like $20 for an autograph. And if you bought an item off the table, they would just sign everything. She was $30 for an autograph and then $30 for a selfie. She's like, "I'm the fucking badass and I can charge
for her.
this." Yeah.
Yeah.
So I totally
for her.
respected it.
Go
There's
for it.
no shade whatsoever on
Nope.
it. She's like, "You want me? pay for it.
I met the voice of Space Ghost once at a convention, and he had a little sign that said $50 for outgoing voicemails, and I was like, that honestly is a steal.
Yeah.
And for years, my outgoing message was Space Ghost being like,
amazing.
"Oh, hello, what is this? What's going on? You've called who? Shawn? I don't know. Anyway, it was
That's
great,
amazing.
so worth it."
He was cameo before cameo.
George Lowe, great guy.
Love
Rest in
that.
peace.
When that distraction takes place, Storm, again, showing how much of a badass she is, carries Wolverine up the ladder. They surface and they reveal to Rogue and Beast that, the ship is listing. I didn't know what listing meant. I had to figure that one out. But essentially, it was the ship is
Rolling
broken.
side to side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's still sitting there. And they're like, is he still alive? Who cares? We're going to go home. And they do not check to make sure that.
Well, it starts going sinking to
Not yet. They have the scene where they're like, fuck this, we're going home. And then the navigation failure happens where it sinks further.
It's also a little bit confusing because the submarine has already fallen off the ledge when they initially started it, like back in the episode, and now it's back on a ledge. So it went to
Different ledge.
And stuff. And so it just keeps,
I think it's surfaced to launch.
Yeah.
By sitting on another ledge, and it's,
right, and then it falls, and it falls. I mean, that's why they're like, it's falling.
Yeah, it's fucked.
He's not getting out of here.
So I was watching like the timer for the episode. It's like there's a minute and a half left.
Yeah,
they're not wrapping this up. And
no,
that is the wrap up. The wrap up is Well, so I have a question. Does he come back, or is the first appearance going to be an inevitable X-Men 97 appearance?
According to the Wikipedia, and again, we have not done our rewatch of any episodes past this one.
That's what we did with the nanny. I don't have no idea. I vaguely remember as a child, and then whatever we see, we see.
But this is the last one where it's listed.
Interesting.
That said, there are episodes that went out of order.
Okay.
So I don't know if there's like a Weapon X team episode where
he's
he
just
appears.
back.
or it's like a flashback to him.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Ooh,
But this is the last one, so absolutely could be a scenario where he comes back for 97.
If there's a Omega Red X-Men 97 episode, I've got dibs.
Okay. You will probably need to be able to turn that around and join us on an audio recording the next night, because
let's do it.
Our whole schedule is going to get fucked up
let's do it.
live.
No, why don't I come over when it comes out and we'll watch it and record?
I don't think he's coming over for those, that's why.
Oh.
But if you want to record with me and we remotely dial into Rod, that could work.
I
I'm
just
down.
figure while it's happening live, we just do it.
You want to try to get him as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
I'm down. I'm
couple
totally
day turnaround.
Totally
probably.
down. Or you can dial me in, and I'll show you guys the two things we use, and we could just do that. I'll do it that night with you.
Yeah.
I'll be watching them the night they come out.
So at that point, it starts diving deeper into the trench at the mansion. Wolverine just doesn't believe that Omega Red is dead and he's still out there. And then we see the go-to for this show of something is dangerous and still alive, and it's the red eyes.
The light up. And
Mr. Sinister got one of those in an episode.
There was the Shadow King one.
Shadow King.
The Thing.
Maybe the Brood in the Brood episode.
The Brood didn't have light up eyes, but the Shi'ar ship at the start of the Phoenix Saga, and those were yellow eyes.
Yes. And also the trope that the X-Men just let everyone go.
Well, they're not murderers.
Maybe they should be.
No,
we established in the first season that they are, because Storm had dropped buildings on people.
Yes, she literally dropped a building on the Juggernaut.
And we didn't clarify that the building was empty.
Yeah. or the episode where you find out the orphanage that Scott used to chill at. He wants to show his power off to the mutant kid Rusty, and he literally just is looks around, does a double check, and shoots an abandoned building. And I'm like, if this is a poor, shitty area, there are probably squatters in that building he just destroyed. So they're murderers, but they don't murder the bad guys.
Yeah, there's been a couple of
They're just negligent.
Yes. Gross.
Yeah, gross negligence.
It's not homicide, it's manslaughter.
It's manslaughter. Yeah, it's manslaughter.
Well, that wraps up the episode itself. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you guys want to hit on this one? I mean, it was, to your point, it was kind of this weird bottle episode, and we know why, because it was this was written in a weekend.
Yeah.
But it's actually still better than some of the other episodes of this part of the season too.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I mean, I sat there watching it with my fiance, who's never seen an episode of this show before, and she was like, that was cool. That was fun.
Yeah, the dialogue makes sense.
Totally. And it's fun.
I feel like in the episodes like this, where it's more about the plot than the character moments for the X-Men, you end up having some of the cooler villains. The Mojo episode is so wacky and weird and stuff like that. There's no growth of any characters in the episode, but Mojo ended up becoming such a popular character from the first episode, they had to bring him back in a later season because they're just interesting and different.
I feel like Batman the Animated Series really set off this 90s trend in animation, in superhero animation, where rediscovering minor like reinventions of villains became really exciting for both fans and writers, because they did Paul Dini did such a good job with like Mr. Freeze, and I mean everyone got redesigned on that show and was like a slightly different origin than the comics, but still honored the comics. And this show does something similar. The 90s Spider-Man did that, and honestly it was what was my favorite part. And what was disappointing, and I think the ultimate failure of shows like Silver Surfer, Fantastic Four, Incredible Hulk at the time, all of these shows were things that I remember being very excited about at the time and then immediately losing interest in when I realized like, oh, they don't have really great rogues, and they're not really, we saw like 3 leader episodes in a row, and it's like, this is kind of boring. I'm kind of in it for the reinvention of the rogues a little bit more than I am for just like seeing a Hulk punch someone week to week.
Yeah. I mean, even in the Spider-Man show, like the fact that they reversed the order of the goblins, like the Hobgoblin was the initial villain, and then the Green Goblin was a variation of him. Whereas in the comics, it was literally the guy who would become the Hobgoblin found a storage unit of Green Goblin shit and then turned it into his own thing.
And they started to branch out even in the Spider-Man cartoon to like, you get your Punisher episode and your Daredevil episode, and they start to like build that universe. And then the Hulk show was so insular. Fantastic Four was a little bit better, but
to be honest, other than the crossover in the Secret Wars episode where the Fantastic Four appeared in Spider-Man, I don't think I ever watched an episode of that Fantastic Four show.
It's not the worst. It's on, I think that's on Disney Plus.
Probably.
Yeah, it's on Disney Plus. I haven't watched Hulk or Fantastic Four, but over the lockdown, I did watch Silver Surfer, and I was actually into it because he had like Galactus and stuff.
Yeah.
But the show doesn't fucking end.
Yeah.
It got canceled.
It just
stops. Yeah. That's the most frustrating part.
Surfer's not terrible.
Till it doesn't end.
Till
like if I had known that, I wouldn't have started it.
Yeah.
It's so unresolved.
Oh yeah, it's like, oh, do you like wrestling? Watch Glow. Oh God, you're not going to get resolution to this show. Thanks, Netflix.
We just did that on Peacock with a show called Shrink that we got super into, and we finished the first season, and we thought it was like a Peacock original, and I'm like, what is this show? And it was like a CISO show that got canceled when CISO got canceled, like in like 2014 or whatever. And I was like, oh, we're never getting another season of this.
Oh yeah, I made that mistake with Mindhunter on Netflix, where it was like, the origin of how serial killers are dealt with by the FBI, and I started watching it after it had already been canceled,
that sucks.
and I didn't know because I was like, you throw it on and you watch it for a few minutes, and it's like, all right, cool, I'll get into this, and then it's like end of season 2, and I'm like, when does season 3 come out? It's not.
To be fair, every year David Fincher is asked about it, and every year he's like, maybe eventually.
Yeah.
So
did you guys ever watch the Black Donnellys?
No.
So it's kind of like a Sopranos mafia thing, but it's with the Irish family, I think.
Okay.
It's based on a real like urban legend, and like the real story. You don't know how much is true or whatever, but the crux of it is the story is legendary because supposedly it ends with the entire family lineage getting gunned down in an alley.
Wow.
So the Black Donnellys. So the end of the first season, I watched this in real time when it was coming out. I was like, oh, this is a really interesting story. And the end of the first season has the whole family that currently in an alley, and they're held at gunpoint, and then the screen goes black, and they're like, come back season 2, and they never got. And I was like, go back in the studio for one day, show it, just finish the show.
So it involuntarily just ended like The Sopranos.
Yeah.
Where you're like left to like, maybe they get out of it somehow. Maybe the police show up, or they get murdered in that alley. We'll never know.
We just need that like next 10 minutes.
You just want to see them get gunned down,
or the other,
or not.
Show something.
Shawn, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
This has been a pleasure to have you. Remind people where to find stuff.
Oh yeah, you can check out Oh Mr. Sheffield, a podcast about the nanny.
It's a fantastic name.
Yeah, just look for old. That's how we found most of our traffic is coming from Google. People searching that phrase. So, but Oh Mr. Sheffield. You can also just search my name in comics, and you'll see a bunch of comics. Galaxies for Hire is the most recent book. Oh, I also did the Trailer Park Boys comic that just recently came out. I did it. It's an anthology, so there's a bunch of people. But I wrote and edited that whole book, and then lettered some stories in there and stuff. And yeah, I don't know. I'm around. Shawn Wrights on Twitter if you want to talk to me.
Yeah, we'll throw all the links into our descriptions and all that stuff. And then to you guys, the audience, thank you all for joining us. And if you have thoughts, make sure to drop them into the comments for either the YouTube upload or the official Instagram post about this episode. And if you like what you heard, we would appreciate a rating on the podcast app of your choosing. Those are words. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Rod's favorite, Castbox. Yeah, I got nothing. Cool. Bye, guys.
Cool.